Hey, I'm ZSH Plays, welcome back to San Bernardino Zoo, and welcome to the penultimate habitat build in the entire series. Today we're leaving behind the retro stylings of last week's episode and building a modern, beautiful habitat for the Wolverine. Here's the building site, back in the frozen north, let's go. Now with this being the penultimate habitat, and more on that later, I want it to be a really good one, so I picked two of what I think are the best Wolverine habitats that I've seen. One at Columbus Zoo in the US and one at Gaia Zoo in the Netherlands. And what I'm going to do is basically combine the two of them. I really like the guest part of the Columbus Zoo habitat, and I really like the Wolverine part of the Gaia Zoo habitat, and we're going to basically mix them together and create something really cool. We'll start the build with the Columbus Zoo part of it, which is the entrance and then the guest viewing, which is in a really cool little kind of wooden hut with loads of moss on the roof. It's a really pretty little build, and I want to get a very close replica of that in here. We're going to start it with this custom concrete forecourt. So I've got a load of concrete slabs which I've placed so there are gaps between them to make them look realistic, and then underneath them I'm just squeezing these ones in so we can get a nice curve on it that you can see here, and there's going to be flower beds in the curves. We'll get some decals on it as well to make it look even more realistic. We'll drop one in there and then a load more. And there you can see the curves that I was talking about where the flower beds are going to go. Then we'll move on to the building itself. We're going to use some Arctic wood for the floor. This is going to be a direct replica of the cute little cabin at Columbus Zoo. So we're going to need to raise the floor off the ground slightly. So we've got these in here and we're going to use them as a grid. So we'll select the grid with the path tool, and then we can put raised paths in here that exactly match up with that floor. And then we can join it on to the path hidden away under that concrete and get a nice little slope in like so. And then we'll drop the wooden path down so it's just above the path and the guest's feet won't be sinking into the floor. Looking good. There's some decking that extends out in front of the building, so let's build that now. We'll take this piece, recolor it so it looks like natural wood, use a couple of them to make it a bit sturdier looking, and then we'll group those and use that to build the rest of the decking. And then we'll make the wooden slope to cover up this bit of path here. Ignore those doors there, they're from the Arctic pack, they're just there as a placeholder. We'll make something much better looking than that in a second. So once we've got this wood in the right place, we can slide it up there and then rotate it to make it look more natural, and then we'll just copy this down along this slope so that path gets covered up. Again, we'll leave some little gaps so it actually looks like wooden planks rather than one solid piece of wood. And then we'll use one more of these Arctic pieces to join the decking up with the floor. And we can also use it to hide those curbs. We'll just slide it along until that curve is completely obscured. There we go, looking good. And then we'll finish off the decking. While we do that, let's talk about the penultimate build. This Wolverine habitat is the final piece in the puzzle in the frozen north in terms of filling in all the gaps, except of course for the massive hill at the back of the area where the polar bears are going to go, and that is what we're going to be building next week. When we started this area, I was working on the assumption that the next Planet Zoo DLC would be out within a matter of weeks really, and I intended to squeeze a couple of animals from that DLC into the few tiny little spaces left in San Bernardino Zoo. However, that DLC has not been released yet, it hasn't even been announced yet, I have no idea when it's coming out other than the fact that it's going to be this year, and what I don't want to do is essentially tread water and spend weeks trying to find little areas of the zoo where maybe we could squeeze in an animal and just keep building essentially unplanned habitats until the DLC gets released, and then attempt to find even more space that doesn't exist or extend the borders of the zoo to get some of those DLC animals in. That's not what we want to be doing. This zoo's been very carefully planned and we want to keep it that way. So next week we will build the polar bears, and then I will tackle my enormous list of things to be done before we take the grand tour of the finished zoo. Alright, let's get back to the build. We're building a custom bench here. It won't be functional for the guests. The bench at Columbus Zoo looks exactly like this, so we're just going to have a non-functional one that looks good. And then we'll drop in the standoff barrier we've been using throughout this area to serve as a fence to lead people up to the viewing cabin. Once we've done that, we'll get working on those doors. So we'll put some door posts in here. I really like this East Asian wood piece, but the colour's not really right, so I'll switch that out in a minute. And we're going to use the back of the small Arctic door to create the doors for this building. So we'll get one of those in the right place. We've switched those beams out now, and we'll start putting these beams all the way along the front of this building and using them to get the structure of the building in before we start filling it in with the rest of the pieces. So one more of those across here. We'll just line that up, and then we can get the front of the building in. Now to do that, we're going to use a piece, and I need your guys' help here. This is a base game piece, the log wall panel. Was this in the game from day one? Because it is absolutely awesome. The different colours on the logs all the different patterns of sort of scars on the tree trunks. They just look absolutely amazing, and I don't think I've ever used this piece before, so I'd be interested to know, has this been added in a later update, or has this been there since day one and I've just never used it? If you know, let me know in the comments. We'll put some windows into the cabin now, so I'll just put 2 of the normal windows next to each other, and then drop in some shutters from the Europe pack, get those in the right place, and then we'll use a couple of pieces of Indonesian wood to make the windowsill a bit more substantial. Not quite wide enough, so we'll copy that across and then rotate it as always, make it look a bit different, and get a nice chunky looking windowsill in there. I love how all the different wood textures look together. We'll drop some hinges in to the doors just for detail, and then we'll move on to the rest of the building. One of the great things about this log piece is it's actually 3-dimensional at the sides as well as on the front, so you can put it like this and you can actually see the log sticking out, which looks really good. You'll see what I mean if I move the camera. There we go. And now it's onto the roof. We're going to use the driftwood from the Oceania pack for this. Just find one that's the right size. That one looks good. And then we'll recolor it to match the rest of the building. You can even get a little bit of moss on the top of it, which is cool. And then we'll use that to build the supports for the roof. So we'll place those along here and then get some normal logs in, which are going to go all the way across the front of this roof here. We'll place these in freehand. No need to be too precise with this. It's supposed to be old and rickety. A little bit of detailing that matches exactly what we see in Columbus Zoo. And then we can build the roof itself. So this roof is absolutely covered in moss. It looks amazing. Don't know if you could get moss all over a roof in Southern California, but you could certainly either fake it or use some sort of plant that gives a similar effect. So we're going to use these grass panels because they've got a recolorable wood bit on the side and grass on the top, which actually kind of looks like moss, especially once this is all finished. And the roof itself is kind of slumped, sagging down in the middle, really rickety looking roof, which I really like. I'm assuming it was built like that rather than that being a result of age. So we're going to replicate that just by slightly changing the curve of each roof piece. We'll have the pieces at the end higher and the ones in the middle lower. And once we've got it into exactly the right position, there we go. Really happy with how that roof looks. Next up, we're going to drop some individual log pieces into the sides of the building to make it even more 3-dimensional, and that looks really good. We'll do the same on the other side, and once those are in the right position, we'll move on to the final part of the roof, the pitch at the top. We got very lucky with this because this pitch roof piece is absolutely perfect for what we want. All the tiles in it look like they're about to fall off. They're all wonky and different shapes, different colors, exactly what we want. All we need to do is put some more moss up here using the decals, and we can get the look that we're going for. Once the moss is done, we're just going to drop some smaller plants into the grass panels that we had before, and then we're going to add a chimney. We're just going to use this one piece from the Oceania pack and then cover it in hosta, going from the large hosta at the bottom through to the medium and then up to the small at the top. Is it hosta? I'm not sure, but that looks really nice. And then the last thing we're going to do on this side of the building is a little bit of gardening. The garden at Columbus Zoo is very green, but there's a very different climate there, so we're going to have a lot more yellows and browns and just a few darker greens mixed in. But we're trying to get a sort of Arctic-y look with plants that grow happily in deserts like the creosote. I think we do a pretty decent job. One more thing to do before we start building the habitat itself, which is give the guests a way to actually see the habitat. So we're going to build a big viewing window here in the middle of the cabin. So we'll line the floor with some wood and then get 2 big glass panels in here and join those up nicely in the middle. And then we're going to put some decals on it. So this is something that zoos do more and more these days, which is to get decals on windows just to let guests know that there's glass there, stop birds from crashing into it, and it looks kind of cool as well. So we're going to use just 2 different decals, one of the mountains and one of the trees. And I'll just keep playing with the shapes until I get something that looks like a little green landscape going across the bottom of the glass. It's dead simple, but I really like it, and it makes me want to add it to every window in the zoo. And that's the viewing window done. Now we can move on to the habitat. The habitat is going to contain a few elements I like from Columbus Zoo and a few elements I like from Gaia Zoo, and we'll just mix the 2 of them together. And we're going to start with these mud walls. We built these for Hippo Falls originally in 3 different colours, which I really like. We'll just need to make a few modifications to them so that they work for Wolverines, mainly getting rid of those roots because they look very climbable, and Wolverines are a lot better at climbing than hippos. We're right up against the raccoon habitat from last week here. You can see the keeper gate there, hence why there's only going to be 1 more habitat in the frozen north. And in front of the walls, we're also going to have some hot wire. According to the animal care manual, they need 3 strands of hot wire. So I've modified the hot wire we originally made for the meerkats and just made it a bit sturdier. All the barriers in this habitat are going to be null barriers, and trying to accurately place walls along where you've placed null barriers can be very confusing. So that means it's time for franchise masters. If you're confused about where your null barriers are, there's a very simple solution. Just get terrain paint, choose a completely different terrain to whatever you've got in the habitat, and then just draw along the null barriers while you have the habitat selected. That way, when you deselect the habitat and all the null barriers disappear, you can still see exactly where they are, and it's really easy to build along them. Hope that's helpful. Let's get back to the build. We're going to do some terrain work now. We're going to dig the hole that you saw the digger digging at the beginning of the episode. Big shout out to PS Vision Gaming for an amazing blueprint there. And what I want is a little water feature near the viewing window at the front so the guests can see the Wolverines in the water. It is recommended to have water for Wolverines along with lots of stuff for them to climb. And as always, I've put some concrete underground so that we have a little base for the pool, so we can just adjust that, get the colour right, and it'll make it look more realistic. I'm also going to have a holding pen at the back, again for realism purposes, although rather than just sticking it behind the building like I've done before, we're actually going to open this up so the Wolverines can get in here. Just need to move some of the walls around. This is basically the same holding pen that we built for the islands. I think the cassowaries have this one in their habitat, although there's no climbing apparatus for them in there. That looks like a good spot for it. We'll put it down there, and then we'll start adjusting these walls so that the Wolverines can get in here. Having these big walls in front of it will just make this basic holding pen essentially invisible to the guests, which is good. I want to add something to it as well, a little door that can be open or closed. It's just a nice little touch, and for practical purposes, it also means I can close it when I film cinematics and make sure we get lots of shots of the Wolverines in their habitat rather than in their little holding area. Once that's done, I'm going to chuck in some plants and a few rocks, and then we'll take a look at this. This is just a group of temple pieces from the South America pack. This replicates the lower level of a weird kind of step/cave area they have in Columbus Zoo. I didn't want to do the whole thing because I've got a different idea of what I want to have for them to hide in when they're in the habitat itself. But I've just used a few of the temple rubble pieces to make this little thing here, and it also provides a nice end to the water feature that looks really good. I'm also trying to introduce some greenery without going too overboard considering the climate. What we're going to use rather than caves is our sleeping logs that we built for the desert house. Haven't used these in a while. One of my favourite things I've ever built, I think. They're so simple, but they just look really good. We'll have a couple of these in here, one for each Wolverine, and the view through this glass is starting to look really good already. We'll put a few more plants in, like I say, trying to keep it fairly realistic in here. I'll make a little custom plant here out of a few of these different bushes, and then we'll get something else that I've taken from Columbus Zoo, a big log that stretches over the water, and then it's onto the climbing. So I'm trying to combine the climbing branches together here to make one long branch. I cannot even tell you how long it took to get this to be actually climbable by the Wolverines. I reckon I spent an hour after I'd finished building it, just fiddling with it until they'd actually climb it, but you'll see the results of that in the end cinematics. And speaking of cinematics, I've got a question for you guys regarding the grand tour of San Bernardino Zoo that's going to be out in a couple of weeks' time. I've been back through the videos on this channel and checked, and the total runtime of the area tours that we've done so far is an hour and a half. Now, that doesn't include any of the Frozen North or the sea lions, penguins, or petting zoo. So if I do the final tour in the usual first-person perspective, walking around the whole zoo, I reckon it's going to be about 2¼ hours long. I'm pretty sure nobody needs to see me spend 2¼ hours walking around one zoo. So I'm thinking of doing the final zoo tour as a mixture of cinematics and first-person perspective, so you get a real feel for the zoo without watching me walk down every single path and trying to get it to a manageable length. The other option is to do the whole thing as cinematics. Let me know in the comments what you think, what you want to see, so I'll be really interested to hear. Alright, we're almost done with the habitat now. I'm just doing some more planting at the back here to cover up most of the mud walls. Really, there should be a lot more trees in a Wolverine habitat, but we're a bit limited by franchise mode here, and that's the habitat done. Let's check it out. Here's the guest cabin. I've made it a little bit bigger because this is a bigger zoo. I'm really happy with how close to the Columbus Zoo building it is. And here's the view from inside with one of our Wolverines having a little swim. This habitat catches the light just right in the afternoon. It looks absolutely gorgeous, if I may say so myself. Let's check out the results of the climbing marathon. Well worth the hassle, I think. I've only actually ever seen a Wolverine once in real life at the Highland Wildlife Park in Scotland, so it's really good to get them into the zoo. This one's going to go for a little wander. The habitat looks so good in this light. Like I said earlier, there should be a lot more trees in here for these guys because they are forest animals, but the only way to do that was to make the habitat absolutely enormous, and I didn't want to do that, so I'm going to keep it like this. It's time for our little Wolverine to have a little sleep. And while he goes to sleep, we will check out where we started today in the Frozen North. And this is where we are now. This area is absolutely packed now. If you look at the top of the screen here, the enormous hill is where we'll be next week, adding what I intend to be the world's greatest polar bear habitat. Thank you so much for watching today, guys. Thank you so much for watching this series, and thank you especially to those who have joined the Explorers Club. I'll see you next week for the final habitat. Bye.